So several of you have asked me, why have I not reviewed any Parkhurst boots? Well, if I can't get my hands on a pair of them, I can't review them. You see, up until recently, every time I've tried to purchase a pair of Parkhurst boots, they sell out in my size very quickly, usually in a matter of days. So with Parkhurst, if you see something that you like, it's best to act sooner rather than later, because if you wait 2 or 3 days, it might not be restocked until the next year, and that's if you're lucky, because a lot of the designs just are discontinued. So anyway, I have this brand new pair of Clover Kudu Allen boots from Parkhurst, and this is a very different version of the Allen boot from the Spruce Kudu boot. I'm actually going to do a separate review just on the Spruce Kudu version because it's a very different boot, and I have a lot to say about it as well. These I have worn quite a bit already. But just for this video, I'm going to be focusing on the Clover Kudu version of the Allen boot. So let's get started. And just to be transparent with everyone, this pair was sent to me from Parkhurst just for review purposes. This is essentially on loan. I do not own this pair. I'm just borrowing it to review the differences between this Allen boot and my other Allen in Spruce Kudu. But I was so excited about this Clover Kudu that I wanted to have a look at it and also compare how this new last would compare to the previous 602M. So, wow, this is an extremely wide last at the widest part of the foot. In fact, I do not have any other pairs of boots or shoes that are as wide as this brand new last from Parkhurst. This is the 618 last, which has been something of a recent development. Just looking at the aesthetics, it is more pointy at the toe, but it also tapers very aggressively towards the pinky toe. And just looking at this boot at first, you might not realize how wide it is at the widest part of the ball. And even with the taper, I would not call this a dressy last because it is so wide. It does look very good, but definitely wide. In fact, Parkhurst states on their website that the 618 last is between an E and a double E in width. Now, to me, it doesn't quite feel like a double E, but it definitely feels like an E width. In comparison to the 602M last, which I recently just got for my Spruce Kudu pair, the 618 is definitely wider. And although Parkhurst calls the 602M an E width, in my experience, it feels like more like a generous D, but the 618 definitely feels like an E width. However, I will point out that the heel fit in the 618 is nicely snug. In fact, it's even narrower than the 602M last, which I did have some heel slip in with the Spruce Kudu. And also at the waist area, it's nicely snug. It hugs my feet. There's not a lot of extra room there. And the instep also feels like a slight improvement from the 602M, which I would describe as having a normal to slightly lower volume instep. It just feels like there's a little extra room at the ankles and the upper quarters area. And if you compare it to the Spruce Kudu boot, you can probably see that I have a wider lacing gap. In the Clover Kudu, it's not quite as wide. There's just a little bit more instep room. And that could be due to other reasons such as manufacturing differences or just whoever made the boots on that day. So this 618 last is an interesting last to say the least. What do I think about it though in terms of fitting the average foot? I think if you fit well into the 602M, you'll probably be okay in this last. Unless your foot is more narrow than a D width, it could be problematic in the ball. I would say if you have a more normal D to E width in your foot, you'll have a much better chance of success with this last. Because the heel is quite snug, it might not work out for some men with a wider foot. Some men might feel like they would appreciate the E width in the ball, but then they realize that their heel is too wide. So if your feet are shaped more like pizza, I would say you have a better chance of this last being successful. Mine are sort of like that, although I wouldn't say I have an extremely wide ball. I just have a more generous D width. And for me, I could say pretty confidently that this boot would work out just fine, because you have to remember that the heel and the waist area All of that locks you in very well. But I wouldn't let the width scare you from this boot, because if you take me for example, my pinky toe is still touching the upper on the left side of the boot. It's just that it's not touching the widest part of the boot. So in other words, some of the width in this boot is just for show. Also, in terms of length, it's actually slightly shorter than the 602M, although just very marginally. I would say there's really not a big difference in length. And overall, I think most men who fit well into the 602M will probably be fine with the 618. Aside from the new last, the most obvious difference from this Allen boot versus the previous ones is that this is a stitch down construction. It does not use a Goodyear welt. The upper is just directly stitched to the insole. You might look at the stitch down and think this is a 270-degree welt, but it's not. There is no welt on this pair of boots. You can see that there are these two nice white stitches where you would normally see a Goodyear welt. And I feel like Parkhurst made a really good choice by using the white stitching in contrast to the gray upper. Parkhurst just seems to really know how to be very good with their taste when they're putting their models together. Stitch down construction has been around for a long time, and a lot of the best boot makers in the world use stitch down construction. And it's supposed to be better at preventing water from getting inside the boots, although I do not have any experience because this is the first time I've actually had a pair of stitch down boots in my hands. Everything I own is Goodyear welted. This boot contains a pretty standard 5 eyelets and 3 speed hooks, which I consider ideal in a boot. I like to have 5 eyelets because it just looks nicer, it looks more balanced to me, and having the 3 speed hooks is very convenient because I can easily take them off. Which, speaking of, the tongue on this boot is gusseted up until about the 4th eyelet, so it is gusseted more higher up on the boot. Some men might really prefer this. To me, I'm just kind of indifferent about it. So let's talk a little bit about the Clover Kudu. Now, if you look at the website, it kind of gives you a hint that there's blue in it, but in my eyes, it really looks more like different shades of gray. You can see a very subtle hint of blue if you get it in the right lighting, and I have seen a purple hue sometimes. The other color I've seen is a little bit of the natural Chrome XL color, but you have to get it in the right kind of lighting. But overall, it's going to appear as more of a light gray or a medium gray depending on where you're wearing it. And gray footwear I think looks really nice. I do not own any pairs of gray shoes or boots. It's a nice alternative to the usual shade of brown, and it also is a nice option if you don't want to wear something that's more loud like a green or blue boot. It's a little more understated, which I think a lot of men will appreciate. This is Kudu leather from C.F. Stead's tannery, and one of the things you'll notice is that the colors and the oils just move very easily with a little pressure from your fingers. So over time, this upper is going to change color somewhat. It may darken in some areas, it may lighten in other areas. In terms of maintenance, the only thing I'm going to do if I own this is that I would use a little bit of Bic 4 conditioner on them. I would not want to use something else because I would be afraid that it would darken the leather, and I don't want that. I want it to stay the way it is. And Bic 4 is generally very good at not darkening shoes or boots. But getting back to the leather, it is very soft. However, I would say that Kudu's not quite as easy to break in as I would have thought. Now, I'm really speaking more about the spruce Kudu boot that I own. I did not have any break-in at the ball area or the waist, but I did have a little bit of break-in at the upper quarters area above my ankles. I did feel some pain from the spruce Kudu, and I know I would feel some pain from this boot as well. Now, it's not severe pain, but you have to remember that Kudu is so tough. There can be some break-in at your ankles and where the throat of the boot is. And recently, somebody left a comment on one of my videos stating that I was incorrect by stating that Kudu was harder to break in than Chrome XL. Well, I am only speaking from my own subjective experience. I try to be objective, but the reality is I can't be 100% objective. And at least for me, I have not really felt any break-in pain from wearing Chrome XL boots at the upper ankles area. But with Kudu, I felt more pain at that area. Wearing the Kudu is really nothing like trying to break in Minerva leather that Grant Stone is using. But my point is that just because Kudu is soft and pliable does not mean it's not a tough leather. And there may still be some break-in involved that might surprise some of you. Another thing to know is that this boot is only half-lined, meaning that it's lined from the waist area to the ball, but then back at the heel and then to the upper quarters where the throat is, there's no lining. This can be good and bad depending on how you want to use them. If you're wearing them in warmer weather, this is obviously a benefit, but maybe not the best choice if you're wearing them on a really cold winter day. But it also makes the upper a little bit lighter in weight. And speaking of, the total weight of this boot is approximately 1.55 pounds, which is identical to my Caswell boots and almost exactly the same as my Higgins Mill boot in the brown Chrome XL. It's slightly lighter than my Grant Stone boots, which are 1.7 pounds. So you're getting a little bit lighter boot, and most of the weight is actually coming from the quality sole, which, speaking of, this boot uses a full-grain veg tan leather insole, and then below that there is a nicely thick midsole providing good support. And then below that you have a Parkhurst brand rubber outsole. Now, this was my biggest concern before I tried Parkhurst boots, but I was very quickly relieved to find out that Parkhurst in-house rubber soles are just as comfortable as pretty much anything else that I own. Easily as comfortable as day-night for me, if not more so. So I would say don't let that scare you away if you're concerned about Parkhurst using their own kind of rubber sole. And then underneath the rubber sole is a heel stack that's also made up of real leather and rubber. Parkhurst uses very little synthetic materials in their boots. They use a real leather heel counter. A lot of brands do not do that. So if buying a boot that is mostly made out of leather is important to you, then Parkhurst would be one of the best options. And then it's also important to mention that there is a steel shank underneath the leather insole, and then a nicely padded pour-on heel sock liner with the Parkhurst buffalo. I really like this buffalo logo that they have. It just makes their brand stand out. Now, in terms of support, because you have the leather insole, the leather and rubber heel stack, and the steel shank, you're going to get very good support. The support I get from this boot is on the level of Grant Stone or Alden or any of my best footwear. I know that some of the earlier Parkhurst boots, people complained that they didn't have the best support, but perhaps this is something that Andrew has fixed over the years, because I feel like they have excellent support. But one thing to know is that this last, it has a more flat shape under the foot. It's not as curvy. It doesn't have like a strong arch that some other lasts have, like the Alden modified last. So if you're looking for something that has more of a shape to fit your arch, this is probably not it. This is more like the Alden Berry last or the Grant Stone Leo, in that it's meant to fit a wide variety of men and it's more flat. Therefore, it's a more flat last, but I don't mean that in a negative way, because a lot of the boots I enjoy, they have a more flat last. Now, in terms of sizing, I would strongly recommend going down a half size from your usual size, but in both this last and the 602M, I'm a 7.5D. I wear the 618 in the same size that I wear the Grant Stone Leo last, the same size as the Alden Berry or modified last. So I think going down a half size is probably the best place to start for most men. Another thing to mention is that these were manufactured in Portugal and not Spain. My Spruce Kudu boots were made in Spain, but for these stitched down boots, they were made in Portugal. Now, in terms of quality and finishing, these are just as good as my Spruce Kudu boots, and I would say the quality control and finishing is as good as my Alden boots, my Caswell boots, and a lot of my best boots. The only brand that might be better that I can think of is Grant Stone. The boot came with these rawhide leather laces, and they do look really nice with the boots because they add a nice contrast. And it also came with a pair of standard brown laces, but I think this boot would really shine if you used Guarded Goods light gray 54-inch semi-waxed flat laces. I think adding the light gray color with this medium to darker gray upper is just going to look fantastic. Here I'm using Thursday boot laces that they sell. These are the very light beige. These also work pretty well because they add a nice contrast, but they don't match the welt stitching perfectly. So I think using a lighter gray or maybe even an off-white lace might work best for this boot. The Spruce Kudu boot that I ordered, it did not come with a box. It just came with the mailing box, but it did come with some boot bags. Now, a box is not the most important thing to me, but it is nice to have one, especially because I keep them and I like to keep my footwear organized. Now, the price of these boots is $428 when they're not on sale, and usually Parkhurst does not have sales very often. But the question is, do I think they're worth $428? Yes. I can say that you're getting a $600 plus boot worth of quality for the price of around $400. I really like that Parkhurst hits that sweet spot of the $350 to $430 price range. That's about the most I like to pay for boots, although sometimes I go a little over that. Just generally speaking, I think that price point is a lot more accessible to a lot of people. But I would also say that there are many companies that are selling $700 and $800 boots, and this is a lot more accessible than those, at a similar level of quality, I would add. So in terms of value, I think Parkhurst offers a really great value for what you pay. I want to say thank you to Andrew at Parkhurst for sending me this pair of boots to review. It's very nice to finally have a chance to hold a pair of Parkhurst in my hands and try them on my feet. And I'm also beginning to understand why there's been so much enthusiasm around the Parkhurst brand. But there's a lot more to say about Parkhurst in the next video. And one more thing I want to mention is that I have an affiliate link below this video. So if you're interested in purchasing a pair of Parkhurst, if you use that affiliate link, it won't cost you anything additional and it might help support my channel. One thing I really like about Parkhurst the brand is that they take this classic design of the plain toe boot and then they seek out these unusual colors of leathers that are not used so frequently. I really admire that they're always looking for different leathers and colors. Some are in blues, some are in grays, some are in traditional browns, but they're always looking for something different. And that's what I like best about Parkhurst is that they take the simple classic plain toe and they just let the leather speak for itself. That's how I like it with boots. So now that I have this pair in my possession, do I want to return them? Well, part of me really does not want to because I like the way they look. I do not own any pairs of gray footwear at all, nothing. But I think I might return them because I'd like to see if Parkhurst comes out with something that's a little more blue in the future. I asked Parkhurst by email if they were going to have something in the Cumulus Kudu, which came out about 2 years ago. It was a really nice shade of gray with a lot of blue in it, but sadly it was one of the worst sellers, so it's not going to return again, which sadly I'm used to. It seems like most of my favorite colors of footwear, they either sell out very quickly or they're discontinued because of very poor sales. So I'm used to it at this point. So I hope you got something useful out of this video. Thank you for watching, and I will see you soon on the next review where I talk about the Allen boot in Spruce Kudu. Bye for now.